Before we begin, viewer discretion is strongly advised. The following content is intended strictly for educational and entertainment purposes. This is the official courtroom testimony from Day 14 of the Sean Diddy Combs trial, as reported by Inner City Press. The courtroom was still reeling from Brad Pitt's shocking testimony the day prior, when the judge called the next witness. Heads turned. High collective gasp echoed through the gallery. Tom Cruise, yes, that Tom Cruise, the global movie icon, the symbol of Hollywood's relentless energy, stepped into the room. But this wasn't a cameo, and it wasn't scripted. This was real. He wasn't there as Maverick, not as Ethan Hunt. He was there as a survivor. He sat down, stiff in a navy suit, no tie, his expression unreadable. The room felt colder. Jurors sat upright. Even seasoned reporters froze. The bailiff spoke, "All rise for the next witness." And as Cruise raised his right hand and took the oath, an eerie silence fell over the chamber. "I didn't come here to be a headline," Cruise began. "I came to say what I should have said years ago." He recounted first meeting Diddy in 2004, calling it a chance introduction through mutual connections in entertainment. He said he admired my ability to control the public image. Said we could learn from each other, Cruise recalled. But that friendly facade unraveled quickly. Invitations to private gatherings, strange conversations that veered away from business, then a weekend invitation to Diddy's Los Angeles estate. He said it was private, exclusive, that I'd be safe, Cruise said. And then, his voice slowed. That was the beginning of something I didn't understand. Something engineered. He described a secret entrance, a mahogany door concealed behind a bookshelf, 2 silent guards, and a narrow staircase dimly lit by sconces. You could hear the water before you saw it, he said. At the bottom, he found the infamous bath chamber. Cold marble floors, a massive steaming tub, soft ambient lighting and silence. Complete, disturbing silence. And inside that silence, familiar faces. Tom Hanks, Jim Carrey, Steve Harvey. Others I won't name yet. Cruise said Diddy entered in a silk robe, barefoot, handing out black towels and whispering, "Leave what burdens you in the water." The bath wasn't overtly sexual, Cruise clarified, but it wasn't innocent either. It was submission, a ritual, a surrender of identity. A man walked around the tub with burning incense. I felt dizzy, disoriented. Time stopped, Cruise said. When it ended, Diddy looked him in the eye and said, "You're part of it now. Now you understand." That was the night, Cruise said, that changed everything. And what followed stunned. The courtroom. That experience, he said quietly, is the real reason I joined Scientology. Gasps spread across the gallery. The judge leaned forward. The prosecutor froze. Cruise continued. The world thinks I joined for spiritual guidance or because of industry pressure. But that's not the full truth. I needed protection, not from the press or the public, but from him. He pointed at Diddy. I realized I was being drawn into something deeper, something dangerous, a lifestyle, a system designed to trap you slowly until you're not yourself anymore. And with that, Tom Cruise gave the courtroom and the world a chilling new perspective on what may have been hiding behind the glamour of Hollywood for decades. Tom Cruise leaned back slightly in the witness stand, his gaze distant, like someone digging through memories buried beneath nearly 2 decades of silence. The room was frozen in rapt attention. Then he continued. After I pulled away from Diddy, I thought it was over, he said. But it never really ended. The packages started arriving. Small, unmarked, always unsettling. Inside, black towels embroidered with the word cleanse. Bottles of bath oil carrying the same scent as that basement ritual. Once, a single wilted rose submerged in murky water, sealed in a glass jar. No note, no explanation. I didn't tell anyone, Cruise admitted. Not my team, not my family. I just kept them in a box. I still have that box. Then came the calls. Always from blocked numbers. The voices were distorted, robotic, filtered, never identifiable. One call he remembered vividly. "You may wear the mask of a church, Tom, but I know what's underneath." A chill moved through the courtroom. I started living in a state of paranoia, Cruise said. I couldn't tell if it was real or psychological, but that's how it works. Diddy doesn't confront you. He haunts you. He lingers like a shadow. He described an incident while filming overseas in 2008. His hotel suite had been immaculate, except for one thing: a black towel folded neatly on the edge of the bathtub. The concierge said it was a mistake. Cruz said, his jaw tightening. But I knew better. The tension in the room was suffocating. This wasn't about affection, he said, or even obsession. It was about ownership. He needed to remind me that he still had a part of me. Cruz's voice softened. It took years to undo the conditioning. I stopped using candles, avoided baths, burned my robes, anything that reminded me of it. But no matter what I did, I was never truly free. Because I never said it out loud. He looked up. His voice lowered. Until now. The room shifted. Everyone in that courtroom understood. What Cruz endured wasn't just coercion. It was psychological captivity. A chain he'd worn invisibly. And, silently, for almost 20 years. Tom Cruise sat forward, elbows resting on the stand, his voice now calm but deliberate. It wasn't just me. A ripple moved through the gallery. There were others, dozens, maybe more. Then he began to describe what he called Diddy's circle of control. These gatherings weren't spontaneous, he said. They were planned, orchestrated. Everyone had a role, even if they didn't know it. He detailed the protocols. Upon arrival, guests were stripped of their phones, watches, and contact with the outside world. They were handed thick black documents, NDAs disguised as poetry, printed in silver ink. One clause read, "What enters water stays in silence." Cruz explained the structure of the nights, always the same: cleansing, silence, confession. Each participant would enter the steaming tub, light incense, and whisper something they were ashamed of into the rising steam. Diddy would listen. Sometimes record, sometimes repeat it back, word for word. That was his game, Cruz said. Shame, that was his currency. Then his voice changed, steadier, stronger. I remember one night, 2006, that's when I realized just how far this went. Tom Cruise shifted in the witness chair, his composure unshaken, but his voice had changed. The confusion was gone, replaced with cold clarity. I walked into that ritual room once, he said quietly, and someone was already inside. He paused. He's one of the biggest comedians in the world. I won't say his name, but he was crying, naked, kneeling in the water. And Diddy? He just sat there watching. Gasps rippled through the room. These gatherings, they weren't about sex, Cruz continued. Not even about pleasure. They were about exposure, about power. Everyone left a little more hollow than when they arrived. He claimed Diddy used people's most vulnerable moments as leverage, currency he could cash in at any time. He'd call weeks later and quote what you said in the steam, say things like, "Don't forget what you confessed," or "I still have the tape if you want to talk." A juror shifted uncomfortably. The judge didn't move, just listened. It was like a cult, Cruz said, but worse, because no one believed they were in one until it was too late. He turned finally toward Diddy. "You didn't offer connection," Cruz said. "You offered control. You bathed people in silence and called it healing." Still, Diddy remained frozen, eyes forward, emotion unreadable. But Tom Cruise wasn't finished. He took a slow breath. The rituals, he said, stopped being gatherings. They became assignments. He described how, after months of trying to cut contact, Diddy reached out with what he called an invitation of honor. Cruz declined, but what came next chilled him. "I received a box," he said. "Inside, a white card, no message. Just a single fingerprint in wax and then a photograph." He swallowed. "It was me, sleeping, taken from outside my bedroom window." Gasps erupted. The gallery broke into whispers. The judge banged his gavel, "Order!" But the damage was done. The room had cracked open like lightning slicing a dark sky. "That's when I knew," Cruz said, voice steady again. "This wasn't a fallout between friends. It was punishment, preservation. He wanted me to know I couldn't outrun him." He revealed how he hired private security for the first time in his career, moved homes, changed numbers, made his team undergo full background sweeps. But the presence never left. I'd hear his name at events where he shouldn't have been, he said. I'd spot people from those bath nights at press junkets, at parties, even in church crowds. People who didn't belong but always seemed to know my schedule. He leaned forward. The most disturbing moment came in 2010, he said. At the wrap party for Mission Impossible, Ghost Protocol. He was in a private suite, thanking guests. A waiter handed him a drink and whispered in his ear, "Diddy misses you." Cruise said he froze. He turned, but the man was gone. Staff didn't recognize him. He wasn't on the payroll, wasn't even on the guest list. He was just there, Cruise said. The room was deathly quiet. The harassment only stopped, he continued, when a deal was made through intermediaries. They called it a truce, I called it a warning. He looked Diddy straight in the eye. You created a culture of silence and I let it live too long. Then he leaned back, exhaling for what felt like the first time in years. But the courtroom could see it now. Tom Cruise hadn't escaped Diddy's world. He'd just been orbiting the trauma silently for nearly 2 decades. Then his voice dropped to a whisper. What scared me most, he said, wasn't what happened to me. He paused, the weight in his eyes shifting. It was what I started seeing happen to others. The courtroom leaned in. There were people, young, talented, hungry, being pulled in. Same script, same rituals, same basement. He looked haunted now, but they didn't have lawyers, they didn't have Scientology. They didn't even have the spotlight. They just had hope. And Diddy fed on that. Tom Cruise leaned forward, the weight of years behind his eyes. He spoke slowly, deliberately. There was a young actor I mentored once, talented, eager. Reminded me of myself, he said. I introduced him to a few studio contacts, gave him advice. He had something. Promise. Then one day the kid vanished, disappeared without a word. Weeks later I heard he'd been spotted at one of Diddy's retreats. When Cruise finally did hear from him again, something was wrong. His voice, it was vacant, hollow. Like he wasn't really there anymore. He said only one thing. Thanks for everything, Tom, but I'm good now. I see the path. He never acted again, Cruise said. Just disappeared like so many others, musicians, influencers, assistants. One moment, rising stars, then ghosts. I started tracking it, Cruise confessed. I brought in a former intelligence contractor. We mapped connections, guest lists, flights, NDAs. He handed a folder to the court. Every event had a pattern. Same names, same vanishing points. He said he tried to warn the studios. At first, anonymously, they didn't want to hear it. One executive told me, "You're not the first to say this, but you're the first crazy enough to bring it into court." Cruise turned and looked directly into the camera broadcasting live. "Well, call me crazy," he said. "But this ends now." The courtroom was dead silent. Not from disbelief, but because everyone finally understood. This wasn't celebrity gossip. This was system exposure. A ritual unmasked. High predator uncovered. Cruise folded his hands, his tone solid. No longer confessional, but resolute. "There's one night," he said, "that I've never spoken about. Not to my handlers, not to the church, not to anyone, because I was ashamed." He described a private event in early 2012 at an estate tucked deep into the Mulholland Hills. The guest list, a dozen names hand-picked. This wasn't one of his usual parties, Cruise said. He called it renewal night. He emphasized the term like it still echoed in his bones. It was pitched as a final cleansing, a recommitment, fit to the code. Cruise hadn't attended one of Diddy's events in years by then. He thought he'd escaped, but the invitation found me anyway. Hand-delivered, no return address. Just an old photograph, Tom and Diddy, arm in arm in 2005. And on the back, scribbled in pen, "You still owe me. One last dip." He ignored it. But on the night of the event, his driver received updated instructions. His security team was cleared. His defenses were bypassed. It was like someone had hacked every layer of protection I'd spent years building. He arrived just before midnight. The house was dark. The only light came from inside, soft, blue. There were robes folded on chairs, and in the center a bath, huge, ornate, like a Roman altar. He was led in wordlessly. Familiar faces sat in silence, some he recognized, some he wouldn't name. Then Diddy entered, clothed in white. He didn't speak. He pressed play on a recording. It was a montage, Cruz said, his voice low. Whispers, regrets, secrets. Cruz froze. I heard my own voice, he said. Things I confessed years ago, things I never said outside that room. One by one, the others began to weep. Not out of pain, out of shock. They'd forgotten they ever said those things. But he hadn't. Cruz paused, then spoke the chilling truth. He recorded all of us. And when he played it back, he reminded us our truths weren't ours anymore, they were his. The bath was filled. People stepped in. Tom did not. I walked out, he said. I told myself I would never return. And then his eyes met the jury. That was the moment I knew this wasn't a ritual. It was blackmail, dressed in robes and steam. The courtroom sat still, the silence heavy as fog. Tom Cruise straightened, up, no longer trembling, his body calm, his voice even. Diddy doesn't collect people, he said. He collects obedience. He painted the picture, a hidden network, not official, not written down, but deeply real. Assistants, stylists, trainers, extras, people behind the scenes, embedded in studios, events, even churches. He paused. You mention his name, they flinch. You question him, they vanish. Cruz said he'd seen directors pushed off films, artists blacklisted, contracts cancelled without a trace. He doesn't need to threaten, he just makes a call. Then came the moment that finally broke him. It was 2017, he said. I was on set. A crew member I knew, someone I trusted, handed me a prop, etched into the handle in faded ink, still wet from the last bath. The courtroom stirred, a collective gasp. I walked off set, Cruz said, went home, opened the storage unit I hadn't touched in a decade. Inside, every letter, every gift, every robe, every towel, memories sealed in silence. I burned. Them all, he said, except for one thing. The contract, he submitted it into evidence, signed in silver ink. 3 signatures, Tom's, Diddy's, and a third redacted name. Labeled ceremonial confidentiality. This wasn't just legal, Cruz said. It was spiritual, symbolic, sinister. He turned again to the jury. This isn't revenge. I'm not here to repair a brand. I'm here because silence isn't survival anymore, it's surrender. He paused. And I'm done surrendering. The judge called for recess, but no one moved. Because on day 14 of the Diddy trial, Tom Cruise hadn't just testified, he'd detonated a truth bomb, and its echo would ripple across Hollywood for decades to come.